Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining me in this session about creating digital books with Apple's Pages. It's a really great tool and I'm sort of obsessed with it right now. And so I'm really excited to share some ideas, and maybe some of you guys who are in this meeting with me who have contributed to some work can share your thoughts and ideas as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start the presentation. All right. So we all good, you guys? Can you see that okay? Thumbs up on that. All right. That's as if I've only done this once or twice. All right, welcome. So my name is Michael Hernandez. I'm a high school teacher in the Los Angeles area. I've been teaching for about 22 years. And I teach film production, journalism, and photography. And so it's sort of an interesting question, what the heck am I doing talking about and using digital books in my classroom when we're supposed to be making movies and things like that. But really, I find that it's a really fantastic way to tell stories, to think about other ways and unique ways that we can tell stories. And then from a teacher's standpoint, you know, thinking about how I can sort of understand my students' learning, document their learning, and kind of understand their learning journey. And I think one of the challenges that I faced as an educator, especially with classes like what I teach, is how do I grade them, right? And so digital books can also be a great way to assess students and kind of track their learning and their learning journey. So it's really great. My Twitter handle's down there below. If you guys want to follow and stay in contact and share ideas and ask questions, I'd love to continue the conversation. So the format for this presentation today is just, I'm going to talk a little bit about some ideas and some examples. I might ask some of you guys to chime in with your experiences as well, especially those that have been featured in the new book that Apple created. And then have a Q&A sort of at the end. I will also share some resources for links to some of the books and other resources that I reference in this presentation, and some other goodies too that I just decided to throw in because it might make sense to you. So definitely want to have a lot of fun with this and have a conversation at the end as well. So we're going to talk about that today, like starting off with like, what's the point of publishing? Why would we do that? And I really want to frame this around less of a technical how-to and more of a why would we do this philosophically, and what does it look like practically in our classrooms. I want to share a bunch of examples, both from teachers and students, and do a quick little demo of a couple of features that I think are a little tricky and intimidating, that I was intimidating for me, so I want to go through those, talk about some best practices as you publish your own books, share those resources, then have some time for Q&A at the end. So I wanted to start with this really great new resource that just came out that Apple published, called Creating Digital Books on Mac and iPad. And it's a really fantastic resource because it really goes to the nitty-gritty of how to do everything, but in a non-intimidating way, and put it into context. And so there's a lot of teacher examples and testimonials, and kind of frames it and explains some features of Pages and authoring digital books that you might not understand or know about that are pretty important. So I was really fortunate to be able to contribute to this project. I'm really excited about it. And if you haven't downloaded it yet, it's free on Apple Books. So make sure that you do that. I have a link to that later as well. So I was not the only one who contributed. There were a lot of other ADEs who contributed, and their content and their ideas are included in the book. You can follow them on their Twitter handles here, but it's because of them that the book is so rich and so diverse. So I think everybody, and some of you guys are here today for contributing your ideas and your wisdom. It really was fantastic and amazing. And we're gonna see some of those examples here today too. Alrighty. And keynote fail. Oh my goodness. All right, let's see how we're going to do this. There we go. All right, so inside that book, it's a pretty fantastic design. As you might have heard from Joe's presentation earlier this morning, there's a lot of reference to Zaha Hadid, the incredible architect that we featured. And we chose to include her because A, she's a woman of color, but also as far as subject matter, here's this woman who has balanced art and design with science and mathematics and engineering. And so we thought that it was a great model for us to use in our classrooms as well, of who we include, and that we can be inclusive in the examples that we use. And I'm having a really fun time with this. Let me stop sharing here for a second if I can get out of here. Oh my goodness. Okay, sorry guys, I am just having some technical issues, which seems to be par for the course, right? Let's try that again. Sorry, here we go. All right, and continue. All right. There we go. All right, cool. So inside the book, we've got a lot of great ideas about design. So details about using shapes and using text and how to make it look beautiful. And I think that's one of the advantages of using Pages to create your digital book, is that you can make it look really professional very, very easily. And I know some of us from the iBooks author days are sort of sad that we lost that, but there's still a lot of powerful features inside Pages that make it really easy to create books. And I think one of the things that's maybe intimidating for a lot of us is design, because we're maybe not design experts. And so this ability to use templates and to even create your own templates for your students to use, or for yourself or for colleagues, is really great and powerful too. And of course, we have a lot of testimony and examples from educators sprinkled throughout the book as well. Some technical elements about how to export. What do you do once you've created it? For me, that was a cause of anxiety. So we tried to allay those fears and figure out how to do that. And of course, a bunch of examples from other educators about how you might use them with your teacher friends and colleagues and in your classroom. And the focus of this book is teacher-centered. So it's about how you guys can create textbooks, workbooks, and other digital books to use with your students and your colleagues. It's not so much focused on students, but I'm going to share some ideas about how students might use it as well. Okay, so what the heck is a digital book in the first place, right? How is it different than a PDF or a website? And why would I choose to do a digital book as opposed to something else, right? So for me, it's always a question. Should this be on a website that I can do and update quickly? Should it be in a book? And it really kind of depends on what your goals are and who your audience is, right? So for me, I feel like a digital book is this beautifully designed, curated source of ideas, information that I want to kind of keep evergreen and distribute. And I can choose to distribute that publicly by putting in places like the Apple Bookstore, or I can keep it sort of private and distribute it to my students or colleagues via my LMS or a cloud storage system like Google Drive or Dropbox or something like that. So it kind of gives you those options. I like the fact that I can kind of keep it, coalesce together. I like the fact that students can read it when you're offline. You don't have to have internet connection necessarily to use all the functionality of the book. And I know that, even in Southern California, in my wealthy school district, we still have internet connectivity issues. So it's sort of nice to be able to do this offline and consume it that way as well. So I just want to share an example of a book that I published recently called The Human Geography Project. And this is really documenting a professional development experience that I designed. I led a group of teachers to Guatemala to teach them how to create video documentaries and digital storytelling. And so I sort of documented that experience as an example for other educators about how they could do something like that in their classrooms or with their colleagues. And so I tried to use the features in digital books with Pages, like photos, video, audio widgets, photo galleries, text, all of those things to sort of document what we did. And so what was cool about that is we were able to actually show the examples of the work that they've done, right? And so what I asked those teachers to do is to create sort of an artist statement of what their purpose and intent was with their project, and actually embed that project into the book so we can kind of see that. And then I interviewed them on video, sort of reflecting on that learning process and how they might incorporate those ideas and skills and processes into their own classrooms. So that was a lot of fun. And then we also included a little bit of a how to replicate this back at home on your own. So for me, this is sort of a professional development material, but think about how you could easily transform this in your classrooms with your students. So, they could, put the artifacts of learning that they've created into the book. They can reflect on their learning. They can explain to an audience what their intent was and their purpose, what they learned, what they still have yet to learn, questions they still have, things like that, and sort of coalesce all of those into one place. And so that's really cool too, because you get a portrait of learning for your entire class, your entire school. and get a bigger portrait of that. So that was a really great idea about maybe how you might want to do that. So when we think about creating the books to start with, I always think we should publish with some kind of purpose. What's the point? Having a focus is really important. Like in journalism, we call it a focus statement, where it's a question we want to answer. So have a very narrow focus for your books when you publish them and create them. It's easy to go off on tangents. I do that all the time in my life and my work. So if you have a very narrow focus, that really is helpful. So you want to think about in terms of who your audience is, what their needs are, how do they consume content, and what's the best way to reach them. That's going to inform how you design, what kinds of content you choose to include, other examples that you choose to include, and how you're going to distribute the book. So always have like sort of an intention behind that, right? So I want to go over a few examples that other teachers have made, some of whom are here today. This is Leah Lacrosse's latest book, just came out like yesterday, I think, right, Leah? Or the day before. And this is really interesting. Leah's a idol of mine. She's does some amazing work with her science students in middle school in Ohio. And she's done, maybe I'll ask her to chime in later, but collaborative books alongside her students. She's created textbooks for her students. And then this one is a really interesting one here too, because this is sort of a class guide, like expectations, resources, and you can kind of see how she's using the multimedia function of digital books, like this video, how to use Google Classroom. And I think that's the other big piece of this too, is why a digital book as opposed to a PDF or something else, is because you can embed multimedia. You can have audio, video, and web links and things like that, that you just can't really get in other formats. And I think that's really the key piece here, is how well are you using media to convey ideas and information that words and text simply can't do, right? And so you're sort of elevating the experience. So if my goal here is to like help all of my learners understand this to a higher level as good as they can, I need to use all of the tools and the arsenals available to do that. And I think multimedia is a key piece of that. All right, so Leah has this really great book here. My friend Mary Kimper is a math teacher and a math administrator down in the Dallas area. Also does some really great stuff. This is for elementary math and some really great activities. This was designed for other educators that she shared with her, her staffs down there at her district. So if you look through this book, which is also available on the bookstore, Apple Books, you can see how she uses video, photography, and other activities and media like that to teach mathematics, which is really brilliant and fantastic. Erica Mosier is just sort of incredible, music teacher, tech teacher, and a big inspiration to me. This is one of her many books about creativity challenges. And what I like about this book, it talks about having like steps in the process, and you can click on those and link to a page later on in the book. And I really like this when it says at the bottom, click here for templates. So that actually links out to other resources that she has stored on another cloud service that you can download, whether it's a workbook or other materials. So you're not trapped and locked into this one book. You can actually link out to other things and bring those resources in and update those resources as things change, which is really fantastic. She also worked together on another book with Owen Hughes, who we'll get to his stuff in a second, on this book, teaching how to play the ukulele. And it's not only beautiful to look at, but it's really using the multimedia functions extremely well. So for tuning your instrument, which I know nothing about music, so this is really helpful to me because you just click on that audio widget and it plays the note. And so you can actually hear what it sounds like, right? So that's brilliant, great use of multimedia on that. And Jody Deinhammer, also a teacher down in the Dallas area, created this book for her middle school science teacher students. And I think that's sort of a rule that you have to have as a middle school teacher, so you have to gross kids out. And so here's hissing cockroaches, right? So again, perfect use of multimedia. They're hissing, so we kind of need to hear that, right? And you can see them move and all these other things. She has time-lapse photography embedded in the book as well. It's a really fantastic use of the multimedia science textbook. Owen Hughes, again, music teacher in Ireland, had this really wonderful book, teaching music through character. It's just, the concept is brilliant. And then again, how he uses multimedia to help us truly understand. And so you can see in this page, I just happened to choose one of them. There's many pages I could have chosen, but what does that instrument, what does that object, what does that place sound like? and really bringing in full sensory understanding of it. So it's a really great book if you guys can download it. It's really great. Even if you're not a music teacher, it's just great inspiration for how to design a book. And then hot off the presses, Owen, you just released this book, was it 2 days ago or something like that? How to create cover songs, music with GarageBand. So again, using multimedia in really great ways. So those record icons with the audio widget in the middle is like the centerpiece is so great. And then I really love how he uses, this is like image galleries to show steps in a process. When you think about why would I use an image gallery? So it's sort of like if I click through and you can say like, oh, do this first, and it's highlighted, right? And then you go on to this step, and then you go into that step. And that's a really great use of image galleries to help explain, because you can look at the words and it doesn't always make sense. And then this is genius, like mixing and matching audio. Look at this, he uses image galleries so students can kind of practice and mess around and kind of experiment with where they're going to put in the sequence certain instruments. And I thought it was just genius. So thanks, Owen, for that major inspiration. That's fantastic use of the image gallery. And we can also use digital books as workbooks. And so this is one Alberto Valdez down in Monterrey, Mexico, designed for professional development experience. And so instead of actually publishing your book as a digital EPUB, you can actually just leave it as a Pages document that's editable. And so you can hand that off to your students or colleagues and then have them add their content. So they can write and draw on it. They can add photos and video and audio widgets right in Pages and then give that back to you. So they can actually add their content and their learning artifacts to that book. And so it's not locked. So it's a great way you can kind of set up this template and create workbooks. Jamie Clark is a genius at this. This is just one of his many workbooks that he has created. And I just happen to choose this one page how he uses tables in English classes to learn novels. So it'd be like at the high school setting, and how you can have the students add their knowledge, add their ideas and other media to that book as they learn, and then return that back to you, which is a really great use of digital books. So in my class, I had a project with my photography students that I created. And what I've noticed sort of in our society, in our world, especially in the US, is this sort of, I don't know, disconnect between other people, a misunderstanding of other people. And I definitely noticed that at my high school where I teach, where people were sort of isolated into their like little tiny friend groups, and people didn't really understand each other. And so one of my goals as a teacher and a dad is to try to get people to understand each other. And it's really hard when we're siloed into our classes or our classrooms or grade level or whatever. Maybe it's geography or economic background or racial background. And so I wanted to try to break through that logjam a little bit by providing a challenge to my students where they had to go out and meet people that they didn't know. And so this assignment was a portrait project, and taking portraits of somebody is a very challenging and intimate experience. You have to have a lot of trust in each other, and you have to kind of get to know them, understand them in order to take a photo of them. And so I challenged my students to go out across campus pre-COVID and find people that they didn't know very well, talk to them, interview them, get to know them, and then take portraits of them, and then put them into a digital book. And so that's what we did. And so this is one page of the book, and I had each student create their own single page. They didn't have to do the entire book because that's a little overwhelming. They just had one page, and I created a template for that. And then they added their photos to an image gallery. They had a paragraph or two of text on the side, sort of explaining their process and their mindset. Then they included the audio of the interview that they did, right? So we actually get to hear this conversation between these two people. And then when the project was done, I had the students reflect on the process and what it felt like and what they learned about themselves or other people, and include that audio widget in there as well. And so each student in the class created their own page. Then we assembled all the pages into one book. And so each book was sort of a mosaic portrait of the school. And I thought it was a really great process to introduce not just photography was sort of the secondary end goal, right? Even though it's a photography class, the main goal was getting to know other people and breaking down those barriers and getting to understand others. So that was a lot of fun in that project. I also gave another challenge at the end of the semester, which was themed in the shadows. And so basically the students could interpret that however they wanted. One of my students, Maddie, is very much into politics and history. And so she decided that while we were in COVID and all the stuff that went down last year politically and all that stuff, what did we overlook and what did we miss in the world? And so what she did as a photography student is she researched these different things that were happening in the world, wealth inequity, abortion rights protests in Poland. And then she created editorial illustrations with her photography. And you can see her cited sources. So this is maybe more along the lines of like a history or geography class, social studies kind of context. But I'm not a social studies teacher, but she just wanted to do that. So fine, that's great. So she's connecting to the world, doing art and combining those two things into this digital book and then sharing it with other folks. So I thought that was really beautiful. And another project I'm really proud of, one of my Black students wanted to address racism, obviously, because it's a thing, and a really big thing, especially in the States. And so same prompt as Maddie that you just saw in the shadows, but she interpreted this project as she wanted to take portraits of and interview folks about their experience with racism in Los Angeles. And so she set out to conduct portraits of other teenagers in the Los Angeles area, students of color, and talk about their experiences. So again, she interviewed them and included their audio widget of their interviews, and then her own personal reflection as an audio widget as well. So this was a really powerful project, and I think it really impacted a lot of the kids in the class who hadn't considered it, because we all got to listen to and experience it. And so letting all the kids have their own sort of direction with the project was really great as well. A lot of flexibility in that to create something better, way better than I could have ever imagined. And then we did some really experimental stuff. One of my photography students is also an art student. And so we really experimented with the format of storytelling in digital books and what we can do with it. And this is a project she actually did last year, but she basically embedded video or photos and drew on top of them outside of pages and then brought that in. But you can see how she's really experimenting with the format and the structure of the book here. And some really great photography and interaction between drawing and illustration and photography and storytelling. This is more of a visual storytelling kind of thing, but I thought it was really inspiring as far as what a book can look like. You don't have to be locked into text boxes and things like that. And then another cool book that she worked on this year was inspired by Cosi Hernandez, no relation, who's a photographer in the Bay Area. And he did a series of Instagram posts, where you swipe across Instagram and it goes to the next panel. But so we were inspired by something that he did, and she created a really, really long image, broke it up into separate sections and put them all in separate pages inside pages. And then the experience is as you swipe through, it looks like one long scroll. So she actually created a really long animated GIF file, and that's why it's animated like this. By the way, GIFs will play automatically when you swipe to that page. And so it's this really beautiful scroll of a story, right? And this is an art piece, but imagine using this in a social studies class or science class where the scroll is like a timeline or a series of processes or something like that. And I don't know if you just swiped by, but she also did like a paper mock-up of that first before she actually created the digital version. And then here it's sort of an explanation of her thought process and her inspiration, and a link to her digital portfolio and her social media accounts as well. So really cool way that we're trying to experiment and play with the format. And then this year we created a sort of a cultural magazine that sort of included, writing like poetry, short fiction, essays, as well as art, photography, and video. And these were students that were not in my classes, so it was a way to be more inclusive and create community. So we could ask for content from everywhere, and people just submitted it digitally. And then I had a couple of student editors who compiled everything and went through all the submissions. So really great experience for them to sort of build community. It's something that we were really missing in the last year and a half when we were all, scattered to our houses. So that was a really beautiful thing. And we hope to do this again this next year and make it global. So if you guys have students that want to contribute, or you have colleagues who have students who can contribute, I would love to reach out to you guys later and see how we can connect and get those students to participate for this year. So that was a really great thing. Okay, so how are we going to make our books, right? I always think it's important to begin at the end, right? So I want to know where I'm going and what I need to do, because some things that I'm going to end up having to distribute or create are going to affect choices that I make at the beginning. Like, how much information can I include? What format and dimensions do I need? Things like that, right? I know Joe was talking earlier about just focus on the content. Yeah, but I also need to know about what's my frame and what am I going to do with it? So both in terms of philosophy of content, but also logistically as you make the book. So I want to go over a couple of things that I learned working on this book that I think are really, really important. The first one is when you choose a book template, and you have to choose one of these book templates in Pages when you start a new document, you have a choice between portrait or landscape. And it's different than just what it looks like. So by default, the portrait books are word processing documents, meaning that the text just keeps flowing on and on and on. So if you've ever read an ebook and you rotate your iPad and it sort of recalibrates and stuff like that, that's what's going to happen if you do this. Now, that's fine if you're just writing words, but if it's like you saw with Owen and Erica and Mary and Leah, like, you want to have design elements stay put. So this format will not work for you. Okay, so because as you reorient, as you add more content, it pushes things down and moves things around. It might not be where you want them to go. You can change it to the format that we use for the landscape, which is called page layout mode, right? And it even says right in there, each layout page in your book will be maintained when exported to EPUB. Basically, it's like a graphic design, like you put stuff on the page and it stays. So page layout is the format that you want to use. And you can convert a portrait book to a page layout, but you just have to know how to do that. And it's in the book, so you can reference it later. But I just want to point that out to you because nobody ever tells us. And it's just like, oh, I'm going to choose the portrait mode. And then it's not working. And you're like, what's going on? So just make sure that you have page layout mode if you want that format. Okay, so just FYI. And then the export option. So when you're done creating this book, what are you going to do with it? Right. So again, thinking about distribution, who does it go to? Do you want it to be public or private? Do you want to have some kind of control over that? Who's going to read it and so forth? So again, one of the things that's really great about authoring books with Pages is that it will always export to an EPUB format, which is universal, right? So anybody can read it, even if you don't have a Mac. And that's important for a lot of us. I know in my school, it's BYOD school, so not everybody has Macs. So you can read it on any book reader. And inside Pages, there's actually an option to publish directly to Apple Books, which is really great if you're already set up for that. Downside to that is that if the students are using school devices, it might not be logged into their account, and everybody has to have that. And I've had actually a couple of little glitches doing that. I've run into a little bit of issue with that. So I choose instead to export to EPUB, and then that will create an EPUB file that will be downloaded to your device that you can then do whatever you want with. You can upload it to Apple Books if you want. You can just email it to somebody, put it on Dropbox, whatever it happens to be. So I would suggest this way, although I know a lot of people have had success publishing directly to Apple Books. So just a heads up on that, right? Okay, when you do export, there's a couple of options you also want to be aware of. The book cover. So if you're going to publish to someplace like Apple Books, there's a little thumbnail image of your book. And so you can make the choice by default that the first page of your book becomes the cover, which is fine if you're in portrait mode, but if you have landscape mode, it's going to squeeze it and stretch it, and it might look weird. So you can also choose an image, and you want to create a cover that has specific dimensions, right? So just FYI on that. And you can find the details of that in the book and in the Pages user guide as well. It gives you the exact dimensions of what the cover should look like. And then the other thing to consider is this feature here, view as single page or 2 pages. What that means is you can actually force your viewer to see 2 pages at a time, no matter what, or like this image here, just 1 page at a time. That's just more of a design consideration, but you saw how Natalie's had in the Cultural magazine, it was like a 2-page split, right? Like a spine down the middle. And that made sense because that was in portrait orientation. But if you're doing landscape orientation, having 2 pages could be really cool, but it also makes the image really small. It might be a little bit harder to read and navigate. So just kind of keep that in mind. And you are locked into this as for the entire book. You can't just say, oh, I want the center to be 2 pages and the rest single page. You can't do that. All right, so just FYI on that, because that's going to affect your design and what that's going to look like. Okay, so some of my favorite features I'm going to go through right now. There's a ton of them, so I had to narrow them down to just a couple. One of my favorite is linked text boxes. So this is a game changer because I know in iBooks Author, playing with text was really incredibly difficult because you basically had to have separate boxes for every single paragraph and you got lost. And I'm going to show you actually how this works here in a minute. But basically, especially for secondary and higher ed, when there's a lot more emphasis on text and writing, this is huge because you have really great control over where your text is going to flow from page to page. And it all stays connected and never gets disconnected, which is really beautiful. So that's another advantage of this over iBooks Author. So I'll go over that in a second. Also adding video. So there's two ways that you guys can add video. You can actually just grab a video file and drop it right in Pages. And that's great because then you can watch it offline if you don't have internet connection. The downside to that is that it starts to take up space on your document. And the EPUB format limits you to 2 gigabytes total. So if you've got a lot of video, it could end up overloading and becoming too big of a file. So that's one reason. The other reason is maybe you want to reference to somebody else's video, like NASA or National Geographic or something like that, where it's not your content. And so it's a great way to link out. And so all you have to do is grab the link from YouTube or Vimeo and add that to your book, and it'll show up as a player in your page. You just have to have internet connection to watch it. All right. And then table of contents, which I always thought was like, what? Why would I ever use that? So table of contents is, again, sort of one of those intimidating things. I'm like, how does this work? It's actually pretty simple. I'm going to walk you through that here in a second. Think of this as a way, especially for longer books, as a way to organize, right? You have an outline when you write an essay, right? You've got headings and sections and there's subsections. You can do the same thing here. It's also a great way for your viewer to navigate. So, and you guys have done this before on books, right? You open it up and there's a little tab and it goes to different chapters and you can just skip to page 57 instead of having to keep swiping all the way through and getting lost. So if you make a little bit longer books, this might be handy as well as just an organizational kind of element. And then one really huge thing I think is really important that we all need to be mindful of is accessibility and designing for accessibility. And so there's a great section in the book. Greg Alchin gave a lot of great information and insight on that, how to design for accessibility. And what I realized is that good design is just good design and it's accessible to everybody. So what fonts you choose, how large are the fonts, what's the line spacing like, what color do you use, right? Things like that. Like here's an example from the book. It's impossible to read yellow text. So don't do it, you know? That means that's good design is universal, right? UDL, right? So that's important. And then also some really great information about how to add image descriptions and what to write. Because I think that's a big confusing thing is like, what do I even write in an image description? There's great information about that as well so that all of our learners can access this. And, you know, it's interesting. One of the things that I realized that I didn't realize till really late, my daughter has audio processing issues. And she told me just recently, like whenever I watch videos on YouTube or whatever, I always turn on the closed captioning. Now she's not technically deaf and hard of hearing, but it helps her understand. And I didn't realize that. And so I'm wondering like how many of our students are like that as well. And so we have to always keep that in mind, even if it's not obvious or flagged from the administration that they need extra support or something. I think it's just good to keep in mind no matter what. All right, so let me jump out of the screen share or the presentation here, and I'm just going to jump into Pages into a quick little demo. So again, here we are in our template choices. Again, I'm going to choose a landscape book template here. And a couple of things that I really like about this here are, and I would suggest respectfully that you stick to the templates because you don't have to worry about anything, right? And I think one of the key things that we have to keep in mind is it's not just about your content, it's about what the book looks like. And there's actually research on it that if design of your classroom or other things are busy or confusing or the colors are off or whatever, it's actually harder to understand and learn. And so just to make it simple on everybody, especially as you just get started, stick to the templates. It's a lot easier, right? Okay, so here's a couple of, this is just one standard template and I can always add different pages that have different styles, including blank. I can do that. So I'm just gonna add a couple of things here really fast. So I'm just gonna change this text here to, and add a little bit of that. I'm gonna leave that like that, okay. Also what's cool is you have placeholder images And what's nice about that is you can either design your own template or use the one that's here. And if I select that image and I go to format and I go to the image, I can choose to replace that image with something else. And what's nice about this is I can take an image that I have here and just go ahead and drop that in, and it doesn't affect the layout at all. It keeps it cropped the way it's designed so that it doesn't interrupt anything else that's going on here, okay? So I'm just gonna add a couple more images here. I think I'm gonna add a page. I like this one. This is a good one, okay? And here, I'm just gonna add one. These are just some pictures I took around Los Angeles because I love street photography. And I know Christine is a big fan of that too. So I'm gonna add that here. I always go on Kurt's photo walks and things like that when we are in person. Okay, open. Right. And even though that was a horizontal image, it's going to be cropped to fit this, and it doesn't interrupt the flow of other things here. So that's really nice too. Okay, one more picture. Oh, this is a great one. It's actually in the Los Angeles Theater. I love this. All right, cool. All right, so there we go. I just added quickly some images there. Now, let's talk about text, right? So we're talking about the linked text boxes. How does that work? So I'm gonna create a page here that's sort of text heavy. Also, if I select this box here and I go to text over here, we'll see that I'm gonna change that. Let me find it, hiding behind my, all right. Oh, here we go. Columns. I want to change that to one column. Okay. All right. So here's my one column of text. Now this is just placeholder text, right? So again, all I have to do is click inside there to replace it. And there's a couple of things I want you to notice here. Notice that at the top of this text box, which I can move anywhere in the page, and this is the advantage to the page layout format, there's a little white circle. We'll get to that in a minute. That's going to be really important. And then also there's this little plus sign at the bottom. That indicates that there's more text that goes beyond the space, physical space here. It's still there. We just don't see it right now. Okay. So I have some text conveniently that I found here. So I'm just going to select this, right? All right. I'm going to copy that and then I'm going to paste it in here. Oh, there it is. And I don't like that font size. So a good font size, by the way, you guys, is one that is about 16 points. So it sounds kind of big. Oops. And it's a little bit easier to read. And then we can adjust the line spacing a bit as well. Okay. All right, cool. And notice that not all of my text is there, right? So I need to find a place to put it. But on this page, I actually want to have, a shape. And because I'm going to have an inset sidebar, some kind of explanation. I want to have an image that goes inside there, like this detail of one of the old movie palaces in downtown Los Angeles, which is really great. Okay, the Orpheum. And what I'm going to do is actually change this to a different color. And I'm going to use my color picker here. And this is, you'll be familiar with these tools from the other iWorks apps as well. I'm going to choose this cool blue-green color right there. I need to change that. So it's going to kind of match. So now when I put this in here, this is just me freeforming, freestyling. So just going to go with it for a second. Remember I told you to use the template and I'm not doing it. What's that all about? All right. And then I'm going to add a little bit more text here. I can just add a text box here. Here it is. I'm going to put this over here, and I have some other text, which is going to be a quote from Paulo Freire. Anybody know Paulo? Okay, and paste that and select that. And I need to change that to something that's going to stand out a little bit better. Okay, and change the size a little bit also. Okay, and then I might bold that. Okay, all right, so here we go. All right, so I want this sidebar to kind of be here, right? but I also need to see the rest of this text. So what I'm going to do is create a new page over here. And again, I will use this 2-column one just because it's here. Okay. All right. And I'm going to change that again back to a single column just for the sake of this demo here. And okay, or we'll just leave it. That's fine. Okay, 1 column. All right. Okay. Now, these white circles, this is what I'm talking about. Here we go. Okay, so this one here, right? If I click on this, you see I hover over that, it's got like a little green. What that does, that turns into my first text thread, right? It's green, right? And this is number 1 is the first box of this green thread. So if I come over here to this other page and I hover over here, if I click on that, it's going to also turn it green, and boom, it's box 2. And this is the rest of the text that was started in this previous thread. Okay. Now that's cool, but check this out. That stays connected no matter what. If I decide, you know what, I want this page to go in between, and I just drag my page in the middle, those text boxes still stay linked. Right? They don't get messed up. So that's a really great feature. And then if I want to add more text, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have another text box over here because maybe this is a different set of information that I have. And I come over here and I want text 2. And this is a different set of information. Okay. And then if I hover on that, I can turn that red, and that becomes box number 1 of the red thread, right? And so again, I can extend this onto a different page and continue that, right? And you can edit them. So if I come over here and I hover and click on that little arrow, I can choose which text thread it wants to be part of or remove it from a thread entirely. So it gives you a lot of options on that, okay? All right, so a couple other things really fast. I promised you table of contents. So table of contents is pretty much designated by the heading, by the type of text you're using, okay? So if I come to this first page here and I click on this piece of text, you notice that under the Format tab in the text window, it says chapter. So these are some default paragraph styles, it's called, right? And so table of contents is built around what paragraph style you are using, right? So there's a bunch of different ones. So there's chapter headings, subtitles, titles, all that stuff, right? Okay. So I have, this one's a chapter. So that's the beginning of the first chapter, right? Let's go to this page. This is not a chapter heading. This is a header, right? And then I'm going to add one more page in here as well, just for the sake of this demo here. And we'll do this one again. Okay. I'm going to move that down here. Okay. And that's also a header paragraph style. Okay. Now, that's cool. So how do I make the table of contents? So over here in my view tab, if I click, right now I'm on the page thumbnails, I can go to table of contents. And what you're going to see here is a couple of things. And I go to edit, right? And I can see what paragraph styles do I want to include in my table of contents. So I know I want chapters and I want headers, right? Because that's all I have right now. So think about sections of content. I might have a chapter and I might have different sections within that. And then I have these little indent arrows. So just like you're writing an outline, I'm going to move this over and indent the header. And you'll notice that over here in my table of contents, it also indented it. So this is my chapter, and these are my sections inside the chapter. And that's basically how you do it. And then when you publish, these will show up in your table of contents really simply and easily. And what's also cool is if you click on this as you edit, as you're working on the book, it'll actually jump you to that page. So if you've got a lot to navigate, you can just go to the table of contents section and do that, right? All right, cool. Lots more to go over, but I'm going to stop that demo here and jump back into our conversation really fast because we've got a few more things to finish up before the session is over. And I would love to hear from the other folks that are here as well. So just a few best practices. I would say you guys start small. Like I did with my students, I just had them design one page, just one, so they can kind of get used to it and then sort of build and scaffold on that. I would also suggest if you are working on your own textbooks or workbooks, maybe collaborate with others. Maybe have somebody who's a designer, or maybe you separate it into sections and chapters, and each of you is responsible for a different part of the book. Once you've decided on what template you want to use, you're consistent. And that might help quite a bit as well. All right, and let's see. Also, again, thinking about using original media. So you can easily grab stuff off the internet, but I think it's always best to create your own videos, photos, and that kind of stuff, so you avoid copyright violations, and also that you can demonstrate good digital citizenship to your students as well. All right, so those are just a couple of things. And pay attention to design, because you should always judge a book by its cover. Right? If it's hard to read or intimidating, it's going to get in the way of the content, which is what is really important here. And so, again, especially as you're beginning, stick to using the templates. Is really easy to do that, right? Okay, so again, some ideas for teacher designed books, textbooks, how-to guides, workbooks. We saw some great examples of that. Maybe staff manuals. You saw Leah's example for her class, a manual for her class and how they operate and things that they need to know about. And then maybe resources for your parents as well. What do they need to know? What are some other media that you can help explain or provide other resources for them? And then for students, there's a lot of great ways that they can use digital books. So designing a lab report, what great way to include video and audio, show processes, explain your videos, steps in the process, reflect on their learning. If you go out into the world and you document a scientific phenomena, you can record it out there and embed it in your book. It's perfect, right? You saw an example of a literary magazine already. Have the students have their own how-to guides, right? There's no better way to learn something than to have to teach it. And so to have them actually go through step by step and explain the different pieces to that with photography, with video, with audio, as well as text, it's really going to help their learning. Maybe we could use this as a digital portfolio, as a way to collect their learning and sort of reflect on that and build it over the school year. It'd be really great. And then they have this great book at the end that they can share. And then for journalism students who are on a budget or unable to go to school, it's a great way to do it pretty inexpensively as well. One event that I wanted to give you guys a heads up about is a book talk that's happening Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And a lot of teachers who have designed books are going to be talking about the books that they've created. Some of the folks that I mentioned today will be there. I'm not able to go to that because I'll be traveling, but definitely check that out on the ADE site there as well. So I promised you guys some resources. If you want to take a screenshot of that QR code, that should take you to a Google Doc that has links to many of the books and resources that we talked about today, and some other materials as well. And with that, I'm just going to kind of end it here and leave it open for some questions and conversation. And folks who are still here, who created some of the books, I would love to hear from you guys. Leah, Owen, trying to see who else is here. If you guys want to chime in, I'm really curious about your book process. And Owen, you just published a new book. Can you tell us a little bit maybe about why you did it and what that experience was like?
Yeah, sure. It took me a long time, that one. So it was, as we all know, the last school year has been kind of crazy. So that was a long one over, my goodness, from maybe back in October, maybe just as myself and Erica finished up the ukulele book. I kind of maybe started on some initial ideas for that and hit it in fits and starts, then worked on it a good bit over Christmas and hours here and there, and I kind of find my hours here and there very late in the evening, midnight, 1 a.m. and a few bits and pieces, and then with the festival learning coming up my game and that. But really, and the same with the character chords one and with the ukulele one as well, myself and Erica, this is how we do it in the classroom. So we kind of want to, get that method down, be able to share that with people, be able to kind of make it better for ourselves and for our own students, but then be able to kind of share that. I mean, like isn't that what a lot of us do? We kind of like to share those ideas and see what other people can make of them.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Alberto Valdez, I see you here in the conversation here too. Would you like to chime in? You did the workbook for professional development experience. Can you tell us a little bit about why you did that and how that turned out for you, how that worked?
Sure. Actually, we were inspired by everyone can create design book, the workbook, and we were seeing that we have the need that our teachers, they were reluctant of what the PBL concept and all the steps and all that we have to take an advantage of it. So we try to create this workbook with all the workflow for a teacher, so the teachers can find either as a professional development resource in the way that they're using it with their kids. So at the end, it results with a workbook when they can add pictures of the process when they were working in class, with evidences from the students. And at the end, it turns out in a workbook that the school can ask for the workflow during the whole project. So it was a really nice thing to work on. We love to incorporate all these text boxes and placeholders where teachers can add the pictures straight from their classes, so they can take pictures of whatever the students are doing, etc. But it was a really nice adventure.
That's fantastic. Hey, Leah Lacrosse, are you still with us? I'd love to hear.
Yes.
And so Leah, you've published a lot of books, but some you published on the Apple Bookstore and some you haven't. I'm really curious about like the books that you collaborated with your students on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, a lot of times if we are going on a field trip or we're doing like outdoor investigations, books seem to be a really good way for them to pull all that learning together. And so while they're out in the field, they're collecting pictures and videos, and they're interviewing the scientists that are, leading us on our different field trips. And it just gives them a sense of purpose too while they're out there. Back when I taught 5th grade and now as an 8th grade teacher, it's like they want to feel like they're contributing to science information. And so they want to have something published, and it gives them a good sense of, being a good communicator in science. And so we were using iBooks Author way back when, and now using Pages for students. It's just even easier for them to publish. And not everything does go to the bookstore, but a lot of it is read internally. So they're reading each other's work. And I think that's powerful as well.
Fantastic. That's really great. And just the idea of like, I don't know, respecting your students enough to like publish, right? And publish together. I think that's
really it's not perfect. Our books are never perfect. They always have tons of flaws. And I'm like, oh, well, that's an 8th grader and a 5th grader and yeah. So, but I think that's part of it too, is that we're always revising, always getting better. That's what I really appreciate about the Apple book, is that it helps you see some areas to improve in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that idea that you don't have to be perfect. I mean, we're looking at some of these examples that are pretty perfect and they look pretty great. But
don't expect that when you open up a lacrosse science book.
I mean, it's awesome. The content's fantastic. That's really great. Yeah, I don't know. Is Erica still with us? I don't know if Erica's around. Erica, you've published quite a few books as well, and you've collaborated with Owen on some. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit, like what your process was like and your mindset behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the collaboration with Owen was actually really fun, but it came at a really interesting time, especially as music teachers. In our classrooms, we're out of our classrooms now, and we don't have access to those instruments. So to be able to create something that could work in a classroom setting, obviously as we return to normal, but also to work independently was really great. And recorders are obviously a banned instrument right now in the classroom. So ukulele was definitely the way to go.
That's fantastic. And I guess like remote learning is huge, right? Even if we're not in a pandemic anymore, which we still are. But if you talk about snow days or kids are gone and being out of the classroom, and how can you still contribute and learn? And I think that's really something we need to think about moving forward. That's really great. I just shared the link to the resources. I know I took down the QR code, so I put the link to the resources that are there. And also before you guys go, I also would love to get your feedback. I was talking to Joe about this too. If you guys have any feature suggestions or things that you want to see in future updates to Pages, I put a link just right now in the chat box. Feel free to jump on that document and add your thoughts and ideas and suggestions, and I'll be sure to share that with the Pages team. So yeah, this has been really great, you guys. I wish we could continue going and going, but definitely stay in touch. I'd love to see the books you guys are creating and to celebrate those and to share those with everybody. So keep the conversation going. I love to see your books. I hope this was helpful for you guys, and have a great rest of the festival and a great rest of your summer.